All right. So the next thing that we want to do with our awesome document is we want to insert some pictures. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to tell you about pictures. The first thing is that we have a bunch of pictures already ready for you to use. So again, if you are in your Canvas and you go into either files or modules, we have a bunch of pictures that are here. And the picture that we're going to be using is Mountain Trail. So Mountain Trail is the picture that, that we want to use. So if I click on a Mountain Trail, this is what Mountain Trail is going to look like. And then if I click on to download Mountain Trail, it will allow me to download it, and it'll ask me, in my case, where I want to save it. So it's going to save it in the downloads, and that's a fine place for it to save. You need to pay attention to where it saved it so that you know where to get it. By default, it'll save it in your downloads. In Microsoft Word, anytime that you want to add a picture, the way you add a picture is by going on Insert, on the Insert tab, and then on the Insert tab, there is a choice that says Pictures for pictures that that you have on your machine, or Online Pictures for pictures that are on the internet. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But right at the moment, before we do that, the place where they want us to put the picture is going to be in the right above where we have Explore. So we want to make sure that we're in the spot above Explore, and they want it to be centered. So I want to make sure that I have made it centered. So I have my flashing cursor in the middle, right below Adventure, and right above Explore Scenic Trails. And to insert the picture, I'm going to click on Insert, and I'm going to click on to Pictures. And when I click on the Pictures, I'm then going to go into my Downloads. So I'm going to click onto my Downloads, and then I'm going to find my picture. So here is Mountain Trail. So I'm going to click on the Mountain Trail, and I'm going to click on to Insert. And I've got then my picture. Now it turns out that we also have this on these machines in this classroom. We have them on a folder called the P drive. And in the P drive, there is a folder called CA100. And in the CA100, there is Word data. And in Word data, there is Chapter 1. And in Chapter 1, we also have Mountain Trail. So again, the P drive, CA100, Word data, Chapter 1, Mountain Trail. So again, if I want to insert it from the computer, I could go on Insert, and I go to Pictures, and then I click onto the P drive, and then I click on the CA100 Spring, and then I click on, or double click on the Word data, and then Chapter 1, and then Mountain Trail. We got Mountain Trail.
I have one for the homework.
Okay.
Can I turn homework in till after Mark tells me?
Yeah, don't turn in homework yet.
The tells me you turn in homework. Okay? I just send it back to that person.
Okay.
Follow me in the class.
Everybody get the picture? Anybody not get the picture? Everybody got the picture? All right. So there are a couple of things that that I want to point out, and this is true about how you manipulate pictures in Microsoft Word as well as in PowerPoint. And that is that once you've inserted the picture, if you click onto the picture, your ribbon is going to change. So if you're working on something else, I need you to stop and look up at my screen because this is important stuff. And even if you're working on something else, this is more important than the thing that you're working on. So I'll wait. Thank you. So again, when you click onto it, your ribbon changes. And so the ribbon changes to the picture tools. If I click away from it, it goes back to being the regular ribbon. And if I click back onto the picture tools reappear. And there are a ton of really cool picture tools that you can use. But before we talk about the picture tools, I need to tell you about these size handlebars. So at every corner, there is a little white dot. And that little white dot allows you to make the picture bigger or smaller. Be very careful about using them. Almost never do you want to use the ones in the middle. In fact, I would argue you pretty much never want to use the ones in the middle. And the reason is that the ones on the side keep the height and width at the same, whereas the ones in the middle will adjust the height or the width, just the height or the width. So if I want to make this bigger, I'm going to put my mouse in the lower left or the lower right or the upper right or the upper left, and then click and drag to make it bigger. Now, the problem is that, like I said, people will often try to do that using the middle ones. And if you use the middle ones, you're going to get something like that, where it's going to be squished. Or squished this way. And so the better thing to do is generally to use the sides. And to show you this even more obviously, if I insert a different picture, if I go onto my pictures, and I'll just randomly pick this guy, totally randomly picked this guy. If I take this guy and I make him bigger, he's bigger. And if I take him and I squish him this way, he's now super thin Mark. Super duper skinny Mark, which is not really what Mark wants to be. Similarly, if I squish him this way, he's going to be squished that way. So almost never do you want to use the middle buttons or the middle choices. You almost always are going to want to use the side ones. The other thing is you want to be careful when you are doing it, because if you do it too far, you are going to flip him. Now, that might be what you want to do, but that's probably not what you want to do. There are better ways of flipping him. The better way to flip him is when you're in the picture tools, there is a choice in arrange where you can rotate him or you can flip him. So normally he's like this, where his part is on his left side. But if I flip him horizontally, now his part is on his right side. It's a mirror image of the picture. A couple of other really important things about understanding manipulating pictures is that in Word and again in PowerPoint and so on, there are some really cool things that you can do. In corrections, we can make things brighter. Now I'll just make it ridiculously brighter. You can make things darker. So you can adjust the picture. To have more control over it, you can click on where it says picture control options or picture corrections options. And then over on the right-hand side, you can specify exactly how much brighter you want it to be, or how much more contrast or less contrast you want there to be. You can also change the picture color. If I make it really saturated, there's lots of color. If I make it completely desaturated, it turns into a black and white image. The other thing I wanted to show you on this right at the moment is cropping. If I click on a crop, the little crop handles will pop up. And when the crop handles pop up, I can use the crop handles to crop my image. Now, the problem is that if you're not careful, you'll change it to the selection handle and you'll make it then, instead of cropped, you'll make it squished. But if I wanted to just have, say, Mark's face, and I don't want any of the other stuff that's around there, I could crop him going into here. I could crop him going into here. I could crop just up like this. I could crop and get rid of his shirt. And then when I click to the side, he's now cropped. And then if I wanted to make him bigger, I can make him bigger or whatever else it might be that I might want to do with this. Another thing I can do, I can rotate him. I can rotate the picture however I want the picture to be. Another thing that I can do, and this is the really cool things that you can do, is that there are picture styles. So I could go in and I could add poster size around him. I could make him have a reflected rectangle around him. I could put a little circle around him. All of these really cool features are really, really, really useful. One of the things that I want to point out is this. If I go back and revert him back to his original state, and I select him, right at the moment, if you're looking at the picture, you can see that it's got the blue, green background stuff, right? It's totally obvious that is there. But if I apply this style to it, so if I go in and I apply this style to it, or even this style to it, or even this style to it, as long as I do enough, it will stop being obvious that this is here. And the reason that that happens, so if I go in and I do, for example, the circle one, the background is still there. But if I didn't tell you to look at the background, you probably wouldn't even notice that the background was there anymore. If you compare this with the original, the background is much more obvious in this case than it is when it's set like that. And the reason is this. What I want you to do right at the moment is I want you to stop whatever you're doing and I want you to look directly at me. Like literally look at me. And when you look at me, what you see is you see me, right? But you also still see the stuff that's behind me. And you see the stuff that's behind me over here. but it looks blurry. What happens is that when you use the picture tool called soft edge oval, or this one is soft edge rectangle, what you are doing is you are making your audience, you are tricking their brain into thinking that they are staring at the thingy that you want them to be staring at. And so what happens is that you see the fuzzy edge around, and your brain says to itself, oh, it's a fuzzy edge. I must be staring at the focused thing, and that's why it's fuzzy on the edge. If you've ever wondered why most wedding photos and most pictures of things that are for sale and stuff like that, why the thingy is in bright focus and then all the stuff to the edge of it is kind of blurred, you may have noticed this. Well, if you haven't, start looking and you will notice this. The reason that that is the case is because they are trying to trick you. They're trying to trick your brain into thinking that you are staring at the apple that you are trying to buy, or that they're trying to sell to you, or that you are staring at the pretty picture of the groomsman, or of the bride, or whatever it is, or the cool car that they are trying to sell. And the point is that what you used to need to use like a tool like Photoshop in order to do, you can now just do this naturally inside of Photoshop, inside of Word and PowerPoint. So on this particular picture, I actually have a really big problem with the way that the book has us wanting to do our pictures. And I'm going to show you why that is in a little bit, and I'll show you how I think it would be a better way of doing it. But first, I'm going to show you the way the book wants you to do it. Because that's actually, what the assignment is to do it the way that the book wants us to do it. So the first thing that we want to do on this picture is that they want us to resize this picture so that the picture is resized to approximately a height of about 3 1/4 inches and a width of about 5 inches. So if I change this and I make him be so that he's got a width of about 3 inches and a height of about 5 inches, it's going to be approximately where we're in between A and D, and approximately in between E and the exclamation point. That's approximately how big they want the picture to be. Now, if it needed to be precise, and next week when we do, or 2 weeks when we do the letterhead, it's going to need to be precise. If it needs to be precise, you can always make it be precise by typing in the specific size that you want it to be up here, where it says size. And again, size will only happen if you've selected the picture. So if I've deselected the picture and I'm selecting something else, it's not going to be there. But if I select the picture, it's going to come up and I'm going to have on there. And if I change this to like 4.9 or whatever, it'll change it. And if I change it back up to like 5, then it'll be closer to what the book wants it to be. All right. So the picture style that the book wants us to use is the drop shadow rectangle. So drop shadow rectangle is, I believe it's, where is the drop shadow rectangle is this one? Yeah, this one is drop shadow rectangle. And this is fine. This is an okay one. What it does is it creates a little drop shadow across the lower right and the lower right and up and right side of the the picture. And so for this case, I'd say this is an OK and OK1. The only problem I have with it is that it's got crisp edges along the edge. And really, generally speaking, you want it to be fuzzy edges so that you trick your audience into thinking that they're staring at the thingy that you're trying to sell. And in this case, we're trying to sell the fact that you can go off-road, adventures, and that you can go on an off-road vehicle. What I would argue this looks like it's a article for is the pretty mountains. So this actually would be the perfect picture as it is right now if we were selling camping at this resort, at the mountain place. But that's not what this is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about the off-road vehicle. Well, you can't hardly even tell that there's an off-road vehicle there. So if I were really doing this, I would crop it so that we just have the off-road vehicle, and then I would make the off-road vehicle the bigger part and maybe have a little bit of the tree and a little bit of the mountain in it as well, but I'd make the focus be of the off-road vehicle. Anyway, this is the one that the book told us to do, so we're going to do what the book told us to do. So again, the next thing that they want us to do is on page 39. They want us to add glow to it. So one of the things that you can do in your picture effects is you can add a glow. And just to show you what the glow does, it changes the color of what's around the edge. So if I use like a yellow one, you can see on the edge, it's got kind of this yellowy edge around it. That's what the glow does. So the glow they want us to do is the one in the upper right-hand corner, the turquoise 5-point glow. That's the one that they actually want us to use. So that now it's got kind of a turquoise glow off the top and off the bottom. And instead of it being kind of a grayish tinge to the thing, it's got kind of a bluish tinge to it. So I don't know, it's okay. The next thing they want us to do is they want us to add bevel effect to it. So the bevel effect means that it's going to make it look like it's standing out, like it's being pushed out from behind the paper and is out in front of us. It's kind of the 3D optical illusion. So to do that, that is going to be, when I select my picture, it is under picture effects, under bevel, and then the bevel is the bevel one, the angled beveled one is the one they want us to do. And so what that does is that, if you look at it on the side, it kind of looks like it's pushed through, like it's pushing through the paper at us, kind of. Questions about this? Yeah. I will happily come and help you with it, but after we're all done, and then I'll come around and help you with the stuff that we're on. And by the way, on anything, if you start to get behind on something, stop what you're doing, look where I'm at, and skip ahead, and then come back to it. And then that way you won't fall behind on the stuff that we are doing. All right. So I showed you the way the book wants this to be done, and I'm going to keep this the way the book wants to be done. But I'm going to copy this picture, and I'm going to I'll just open up a new screen, and I will reinsert the picture. That'll be a better way of doing it. So I'm going to reinsert this picture. So it is mountain trail, right? So I told you that this is not how I would have done it. I'm going to show you how I would have done it. So I want you to stop what you're doing, just look up at the screen, and I'll show you why I think this. So the first thing is that the whole point of this is about the off-road vehicles. So because of that, I would crop our picture so that the off-road vehicles would be the more important thing. So I would probably go in and maybe put it in so that we can see some more of the trees. So maybe some of those trees and some of those rocks and stuff. So I would actually have it be more like this as our initial picture. And then again, I want to add a like a fuzzy edge around the stuff. So I'd probably put it in kind of like this. And then I would go back and I would go back into my crop and I would realign it so that the family was kind of in the middle, because there is a concept in art known as the rule of thirds. So I'd put this in maybe the lower quadrant of the rule of thirds. And the idea behind the rule of thirds is that you take a picture and you slice it up into thirds. And whatever's in where the lines would intersect would be the part that you would want to use. So if I put in a pretend rule of thirds thing, so this would be a line going like this, and then another line going like this. What's that? That's not quite a third. That's more about a third. And then another line, insert shape, going across. So about to there is about a third, and about here. So that's approximately the picture broken up into thirds. And what the rule of thirds says is that the most important thing should be either here, or here, or here, or here. So if we look at the other picture and we make this into the rule of thirds, we're basically saying that this is the most important thing, or this is the most important thing, or this is the most important thing, or this is the most important thing. And not this guy, because this guy's down way at the bottom corner. And it's at the part of the picture that nobody looks at. Nobody looks at the stuff that's down at the bottom center, which is why I think this is a terrible picture if this is a picture about off-road vehicles. If this is a picture about mountaineering and having a good time in the Colorado, Rockies or whatever, then sure, this is a great picture because the mountains are in the rule of thirds and the pretty trees are in the rule of thirds. But if this is all about this, then I would argue something closer to, well, not that guy, something closer, although that guy is important too, but I'd say something more like this is going to be a more effective picture for selling off-road vehicles, if that's what our goal is. Does that make sense? All right, that said, this is how the book wants it to be done, so we're going to do it the way the book wants it to be done. So there is one last thing that the book wants us, well, a couple of last things that the book wants us to do to this. One of the last things that the book wants us to do with this is they want us to put in a border all the way around the picture. And you may have noticed that on most posters, there is a border around the poster. We got poster over there, it's got a border around it. Poster there, it's got a white border around it. Poster over there, it's got a border around it. Most things have borders around it. And so it turns out it's actually pretty easy to create a border in Microsoft Word. So to add a border in Microsoft Word, it's on the Design tab. And when we go to the Design tab, there's a thingy on the right-hand side called Page Borders. And if you click onto the page border, you then can define how you want the border to be. Now, the way that the book wants us to do the border is that they want us to choose not the solid line, but the dotted line. So the second one. And then they want us to choose the color to not be black, but rather to be, I think it's lime accent 3, I think is what they want. Or lime accent, is it lime accent 2? Lime accent 2, my bad. Lime accent 2, lighter 80%. And then they don't want the width to be 1/2 point. They want the width to be 4.5 points. This is on page 42. And I think that's all they want. And they want it to be around the whole thing, which is what it does by default. And so if I click OK, it's going to show up. Now, the problem with this is that you can't hardly see it. So I would argue the better choice is to make it so you can actually see it. So I'm going to change the color to being a darker color so that you can actually see the border. And I would recommend making it darker so that we can actually see the border. So we got the little dotted line going around the entire border. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that another choice that you could do on your design, on your page borders, is that in addition to having the colors and so on, is that you can have art. So they've got all of these art thingies. So if you want Christmas trees, you can put Christmas trees around your borders, or other things that are on there, all sorts of different pictures that you can choose. And so you can choose to have, apples around it if you wanted, something like that. Lots of different choices for the page border. But for what they want us to do, it's going to be a green border, size 4.5 point. Now, the only problem with the way this is done right at the moment is that adventure is about like 1/2 inch between the dots and the word adventure. And down at the bottom, it's like about 1 inch or so between to book your adventure and the dots. So it's always best whenever you're doing a poster to have it be not only centered, going across, but also up and down. So both horizontally and vertically. So to do that, what we can do is that we can go in our page setup, which is found in page layout. And in page layout, in page setup, we can click on the more button. This little guy right here is the options button or the more button. When you click on the options button, it shows you more things that you can do. And one of the more things that you can do is you can go in on layout. And on layout, by default, vertical alignment is set to top. So by default, your vertical alignment is set to top, but you can instead make it be centered. And if I do center, it's going to center my content so that the distance between here and the end is the same as the distance between here and the top. So that it's nice and evenly centered. Another thing that we can do that they want us to do is that in our adventure, by default, the page layout has 8 points between the end of the line and the start of the next line. But if we increase this from 8 points to 12 points, it moves it down a little bit. So again, if I put it back, make it go down, you can see it moves just a little bit. And if I want to make it go more, I can make it go more. But what they want us to have it at is 12 points. But only for adventure. So now that I've finished my flyer, if I am certain that I am all done, then I want to save it and I want to turn it in so that I get my 10 points or whatever it's worth. I forget, I think it's worth 10 points. So I'm going to save my document, and then I go into my Canvas and I go into my assignments. Again, if you're working on something else, I want you to stop for a moment and look up at my screen. So I go into my assignments and I go into my adventure flyer. And when I go into my adventure flyer, I first of all want to make sure that I saved my document with my name on it. So again, make sure that your document name has your name on it. Yes?
Sorry, but I guess we skipped 2 steps because on the book said that we had to add after trails today, the word today, and then open March is the last.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. I forgot to change some words on it, didn't I? Where did we do that? It should say self-guided tours available, gear provided.
Has to go in the last list.
Yeah, they wanted us to move it, didn't they? I think you're right. I think we forgot to move it.
Yeah, and after trails, you had to add the word today.
Right. Forgot to do page 49. You are absolutely right. Page 49, I forgot to move my text. So what they want us to do is they want us to move all vehicles and gear provided above where March to October is. You're absolutely right. So there are 2 ways to do that. One way to do that is to select the text and then click and drag it and release, and it will move it. That's one way to do it. Personally, I don't like to do it that method. And the reason I don't like to do it that method is because it's too easy to accidentally not select everything that you want to select. So instead, I think the better way of doing it is to select the stuff that you want to get rid of or that you want to move and do a cut. To cut, it is Control X, or to go on home and then to choose cut. And then move it to where you want it to go and then paste. Control V, or to click on to paste. I think that's the better way of moving your content. You can move it by selecting it, clicking and dragging and releasing, which is what the book is telling you to do on page 50 and 49. But I would caution you to be careful about doing that. The other thing is that in between trails and with, they want us to add in the word today. And then they decide they don't want us to have today in there after all. So to delete today, you can then delete today. I don't know why they want you to add it and then release it or delete it, but there it is. All right. So now that I've got my document done, now I'm going to save it. And again, make sure that you save it with your name on it so that it's easier for us to grade. And to turn it in, if you're sure that it's ready to be turned in, I click on to submit assignment. And when I click on to submit assignment, I'm going to click on to choose file. I'm going to locate the file that I am working on. So that's what I did last year. I want to go into my documents and this is not my documents. This is the problem I had before. I want to go into my documents. And then in my documents, in the super duper awesome stuff folder, and in the super duper awesome stuff folder, I've got the Mark Branham adventure flyer. I click on to open. If I want to give a comment to the graders, I can put in a comment. So if I want to say, the reason to put in a comment would be, for example, the book says to use a particular picture and you couldn't find the picture, so you used your own picture. So then you would just say, I know I was supposed to use the mountain trail picture, but I couldn't find it. So is it okay that I use this picture instead? The answer is probably fine. And then I click on to submit. And when I click on to submit, it will pop up on my phone and on Joe's phone saying that Mark Branham just turned in his assignment and and it's all done. So now Joe grades it. He says, terrible job, Mark, totally redo it. So then I go back and I redo it and I'm ready to turn in my resubmission because I want my points. So do a resubmission, I go back to assignments, and where it used to say submit assignment, it now says resubmit assignment. And when I click on a resubmit assignment, I go to download the picture or download or upload rather the document, and then submit assignment, and the resubmission will have been resubmitted. So that's how you submit and resubmit an assignment. Yeah.
So a student asked earlier if she can download it through Canvas. Didn't you say we send it like that?
Yes, that is exactly how you could do it, because you'll notice that if you scroll down on here, that now it says download Branham Mark Adventure Flyer -1 because I've put in 2 of them. And so if I, wanted to download the picture, download the document, here it is. And if I download it, it's now downloaded. And if I open it up, here's the downloaded version. So I have 2 versions now on my computer. I have the original version that I submitted 10 minutes ago and the new version that I just downloaded from Canvas.
Because I was a student that was submitting it.
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
I was trying to download it on my computer.
Yep, very good. No worries. All right. Questions? Other questions? Yes.
So I'm trying to bring back the signature line up to the first page, and I'm adjusting the spacing on before and after, and it's still like not.
Okay, I'll come and take a look and see what's going on. All right, one last thing that I wanted to mention, and that is that, again, you have some homework. So your homework, in addition to finishing, chapter 1, part 1, is to do chapter 1, part 2, and chapter 1, part 3. So chapter 1, part 2 is to create the puppy for sale, flyer. And that is on page 60. So on page 15, I think it starts on page 59. Page 60 is what it should look like when it's done. And again, one of the things that it tells you to do is on step number 6, or step number 5 rather, it says change theme colors to aspect. That is a very, 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 very important step. Change theme colors to aspect. Because if you don't change the theme colors to aspect, you will not be able to find dark purple, accent 1, etc. That's going to be the next thing. So make sure you do step number 5, change theme colors to aspect. And how do I do that? Again, I do that by in my design, in colors. It doesn't look like aspect is there. That's because I have not scrolled down all the way. Scroll down all the way. There's aspect. So that's problem number 2. And then problem number 3 is that I want you to create your own flyer. So to create your own flyer, what I want you to do is design and create a personal flyer using all of the necessary components for a flyer. So same stuff that we just did. So if, you know, your kid is having a birthday party, make a birthday party flyer. You want to tell everybody about your favorite book? Tell everybody about your favorite book. You want to tell people about why Star Wars is totally awesome? Go ahead. Whatever you want to do is fine. As long as it's, you know, PG-13 or better, you know. Better being lower, not, you know, higher. G is great. PG is great. If for some reason you just can't think of anything else, you could do one of the other ones that are in the book. So the book has one called Specialty Wedding Treats and another one called the Hair Stack Beauty Salon. I mean, if you really can't think of anything else, you can go ahead and do one of those, but I'd rather you create something that's on your own, that you're actually going to use. Any questions about anything at all that we've covered today other than why is it not working on my machine? I'm going to come around, help you make it work on your machine, which is why we have class until 10, even though we're really pretty much done. All right, so what we're going to do next week is we're going to do chapter 2, which is creating research paper with references and sources. So we're going to talk all about the joy and wonder that is MLA. It's going to be awesome. You're going to love it. Super fantastic. That's the plan for next week. All right, like I said, I'm going to come around and help anybody that needs any help, but otherwise have a great week and we'll see you next time.